Hi all, we're going to look at Preludes by T.S.Eliot. When we look at this poem, obviously we look at the title first and we focus in on the fact that it's something that comes before something else, but in a more musical sense, it's a piece that precedes the main musical composition. So we've seen now with Eliot that in the first poem we had the love song, and now we've got preludes. So there's a lot of musical sort of references in his poetry that can connect these two poems. I'm going to make a lot of connections to Proof Rock at times, and that's going to be something that you will notice in a lot of his poems, that he connects back to Proof Rock as his sort of main text. So when we first look at this sort of musical element, I want to discuss that first and just get you to highlight all of the S's that are in that first section. So you've got S in settles, smells, stakes, passageways, there's the double S and the S at the end, six. Then you've got smoky days, you've got ends of days, gusty, shower, raps. You get the point that there's a lot of these soft S sounds. So this is a technique we call sibilance, which you can see there. And it's a really rhythmic sort of technique. And it creates that musical element that we're looking for in this piece because it is a prelude. When you think about the sound of it, it's that really soft sound. But again, generally we would imagine that a soft sound would be really, really beautiful and really nice imagery. But what Eliot actually uses it for is to have the sense of the sound being very soft and very, very lovely. But the actual ideas represented in the first section are quite confronting about the industrial world. So again, we've got him using a technique that is meant for one thing, but then obviously using it for a very, almost the opposite or the antithesis sort of reasoning, and this becomes one of those aspects of modernism, okay, where he's using the structure of his poem to sort of play around, okay, and to sort of almost confuse us about the complexity of what he's trying to write about. So the poem's converted into these four sections, and the first section kicks off straight away with a bit of pathetic fallacy that is very, very powerful to us. So winter is always the season of death and represents that symbolically. And it's not a really hopeful start. The evening, brings in this natural element and the personification of it settling down. Sort of makes it seem like everything's slowing down, which again would generally be a fairly positive thing, that we're sort of taking some time and resting. And it's quite a beautiful image. But like Proof Rock, a lot of his beautiful images are not always followed by beautiful images. We've got the next one, right, of dinner being made, and in the passageways in between, the industrialized sort of city, you can smell steaks. So we've got this olfactory sense where we're actually getting the aroma of these steaks, which I would say is a beautiful image. I'm really happy with that. The alliteration of smell and steaks, and the S's in passageways, so that's sibilance is really there. We've got the iambic tetrameter, which is slightly different from pentameter, with a 4-stress sort of 8-beat rhythm, and again that creates this musical sense. So the first two lines, pretty nice. The only probably negative is that they're in passageways, that they're sort of narrowed and sort of caught. Then we've got this idea of 6 o'clock, which is the end of day, sort of like home life, returning after you work at the factory. So that again would be, I would imagine, potentially a fairly positive, sort of image. Then though, we've got back to this sort of negativity where he says the burnt out end of smoky days, okay? And when I think about burnout, obviously, the factories and the industrialization, the pollution, and that would go with the smoke as well. But now the smell of the steaks aren't smelling so good anymore. It feels like they're burnt and overcooked, and it's not quite as, sort of a pleasant an image as it was before. So then when we get down to, the gusty shower wraps, the grimy scraps, so we've got nature, trying to clean, out this sort of industrialized system. But nature tries to wash it away, but it's like the rubbish and the waste is pretty powerful, all right? Because we've got these grimy scraps, that are still there. And it's hard to get rid of them, even with this, sort of really powerful natural shower. And then we've got these withered leaves. Okay, withered is obviously a bit like winter. They're decaying. They're dying. They've sort of been around for a bit, but they're no longer useful anymore, and the withered leaves come to your feet. Okay, so we've got the idea of synecdoche again, which we also had in our original poem Prufrock. So I think that this is really interesting. That again, he's going to use this synecdoche quite a lot. Okay, in the poem, we'll comment on that as we go. And then he's got newspapers from vacant lots. So newspapers like the news of the day, gives us an idea of what's happening. But the idea then that they're in vacant lots has this real suggestion of a wasteland, and it's not a very positive image when we sort of put it together. Then we go straight from that, okay, these newspapers in the vacant lots, okay, which is sort of an isolated and sort of lonely image, to the showers beat now, okay. So the showers really, nature's really trying to control this. And we've got, again, that musical element, because the showers beat, it's almost onomatopoeia, and the beat sort of, really starts to penetrate, the confronting image. The rhythm is like the rain, so the shower's beating, it's like we can hear the rain, so it's got that real oral sense. And then the alliteration of on broken blinds sort of again gives us the indication, emphasises the broken blinds, that things aren't perfect here, that things aren't going as well as we would perhaps hope them to be. And chimney pots, okay, chimney pots would again be a bit of an example of things that are probably causing pollution, okay, and creating this sort of grimy and sort of smoky and burnout world. And then at the corner of the street, okay, so again, the corner of the street feels again a little bit isolated, a little bit lonely, and then he's got the actual word, a lonely cab horse steams and stamps. And again, the alliteration, and then the MP, like the harshness of stamps, sort of gives us the impression of the horse almost sort of banging its hoof against the ground. Okay, so again, we've got a lot of oral effect, in this opening sort of section. And then that's the sort of the end of the stanza, or the end of that stanza in this section. And the lonely, obviously, or the loneliness of the cab horse, sort of represents the loneliness of the men, of the people in the city, but also in a deeper way, that lonely man that we met in Prufrock. Okay, so that this loneliness is just a really large aspect, okay, of what the people in this age are going through. So when you think about that sort of section, we've also got this idea that the people are like the cab horse, they're forced into labour and they've got to work really hard, but they're feeling very lonely, okay, as a result of this. So when you go on, then we've got this one line stanza essentially, and then the lighting of the lamps. Sort of to me gives the idea that the motif of lighting is generally positive. It's something that we're sort of hopeful about. But when we're looking at the lamps, this sort of manufactured light, sort of contrived light, that everyone's in their house and they're sort of by themselves, and then we're sort of questioning, well, where's the community, and what's going on in terms of connection. So in this strange way, the lighting of the lamps sort of isolates people back into their own homes, and the sense of potential community is sort of lost. So that's a really interesting sort of start to the prelude, that the night, as you sort of finish your day, which is generally you go home and it's a positive, Eliot's turned that into a fairly sort of heavy negative image of what's going on in this particular section. Then he moves into section 2, and it's the night's over now, we've come back to the next morning, and he gives us this sort of quote, "The morning comes to consciousness." And the personification again of the morning, just like we personified winter. Morning usually represents a bit of opportunity, new day, and the consciousness is that we're aware of what is happening, and the sense then of the faint stale smells of beer sort of gives us the impression of potentially a hangover, and the person's waking up from the evening before, but the beer and the consciousness, they're just trying to actually get themselves going again, and it's sort of maybe the drinking of the beer is used as an agent to numb themselves from the reality of the world that they're living in, which is again a fairly negative sort of image. Then we've got the sawdust trampled street. So the people who left those sort of cheap pubs, we remember that from Prufrock, the sawdust restaurants. So we've got again this sense of like lower class, and drinking and vomiting and poor sort of general behaviour, not really necessarily giving us a real positive image again. Then we've got with all its muddy feet. So remember, the muddy feet is the morning, so it's still this continued personification. And again, it's a very dirty, destructive sort of image. And the muddy feet are again a representation of the industrial age and how muddy and how dirty the world is. So they're pressing to early coffee stands. So again, to me, like a drug or sometimes a hangover cure to get to a coffee stand and get a coffee into you. They're trying to kickstart the day, but through like a drug, like coffee. To me, like, I know I'm exaggerating there because it's just caffeine, but like they need something artificial, something that's been taken from the land naturally and then sort of manipulated into a product that can sort of get them going again. All right, that they need these substances. So beer to dull the senses, and then coffee to sort of ignite the senses to get started. And then that's the sort of end of that sort of idea, if you know what I mean. And we go on to with the other masquerades. Okay, now we've got the masquerades as the facade, the mask, the faces. We prepare to see the other faces from Prufrock. And again, that idea of Michelangelo and the sculpture, okay? The idea that masquerades are not quite the truth, they're contrived, okay? So obviously the other masquerades might be like, putting a suit on or, putting makeup on or whatever it is that you're trying to do to represent yourself in a way that might not be exactly true. And then time resumes, right? So we've got again this motif of time. We had 6 o'clock before, but time resumes again in this morning. An illusion that time resumes is sort of like the whole world was put on pause last night, and the idea that time comes back again now is that this idea of the routine and the cyclical nature of life, okay, which is mundane and boring, which again would link back heavily to Prufrock. Then we've got one thinks of all the hands, okay, and again we've got that synecdoche, parts of a greater whole, that are raising dingy shades, okay? So when they're waking up in this morning too, it's like even they're trying to let in this natural light, okay, to try and sort of, to me, this motif of lighting of the lamps was like to create like a homely effect in your home. Now you've got, you're raising the dingy shades to try and let natural light in. You're trying to connect as much as you can with light, okay, in this very dark, very dingy world. And then the sort of hyperbole of in 1,000 furnished rooms. The furnish obviously is industrialization, made sort of products, but the 1,000 and the hyperbole is the meaninglessness of life, okay? This real sort of, just the rigor of going around and around in circles and everyone doing the same thing, okay? There doesn't seem to be like a heap of individuality in this particular poem. And when you think about that, there's no individual. So we've got Prufrock in the original sort of text that we looked at, but Preludes here, that it's just everyone, okay, sort of the collective experience, and it's all the same, okay. So we then move to section 3, and we've got a lot of you here, okay. So you could be, again, could be you, the person, the audience, the reader. It could be a character that's sort of like, omniscient, that he's put in there. But I like the idea that I'm there. As soon as I hear you, I feel like I'm coming into the poem a little bit and that I'm a part of it. So then I go to me tossing a blanket from the bed, okay? So I'm starting to get up again. I'm trying to get out of my sort of bed and get started. You lay upon your back and waited, okay? So again, you've got this sort of thing, lay upon your back, sort of like this sexual illusion of a person laying on their back. And there's interpretations of this poem that says that you may not be you, it's actually a prostitute, doing their work. And I can see how that analysis could work. But in some ways, like the idea here is that, it's just your sort of frustration at this stage, okay, like of having to sort of go back into the life that you're already in. And then, you waited, you dozed, and watched the night revealing the 1,000 sorted images. Okay, so we're back to this sort of sense of like the night revealing, which is a bit of an oxymoron because usually light is what is needed to reveal. But here in this industrialized world, it's the night and the dark that actually reveals more than the day. The 1,000 sorted images, so again, the hyperbole. So before we had 1,000 furnished rooms, now we've got 1,000 sorted images. But they're like the impure thoughts that we have in our mind, okay? That our impurity in our mind, these sorted images, are a reflection of the impurity of the city, okay? It's sort of like we're parallel to the way that the city, is sort of focusing on things that are dirty and muddy and sort of that absence of light, that darkness. And of which your soul was constituted, it's like that's how we were established. Like we were established to be a certain way, but we're sort of moving away from that, okay? That we're becoming a little bit more impure. The idea that those ideas flickered against the ceiling, these 1,000 sorted images, flickered's a very, interesting word because we saw that in Dante's Inferno, okay, with the fire when we looked at Guido. And then when we looked at Guido flickering, we said like he wouldn't speak, and that represented how he spoke. And then it came back later in the play, in the poem, and we get the sense that this idea of flickering again is this allusion to Prufrock, and it's like the flame and the lowest part of our human sort of self. So that would very much link in with prostitution, or even with these sorted images and of us moving away from who we should be. So we've got that sort of idea of those circles of hell. We're Guido. We're really down deep in hell. And we're living that now on earth, okay, this sort of nightmarish hell that we've sort of created for ourselves. And when all the world came back, we get again this hyperbole. It's like we have the chance or the opportunity to come back and sort of get away from these impure thoughts, and the light crept up between the shutters. So we've got the idea that the light, the goodness, is trying to get in, it's trying to creep in, but we've got it almost shut out, okay, or it's behind dingy shades. So it's like there is goodness there, this sort of positive motif of light, but it's very difficult because we're not letting it get in. And even the fact that the light is creeping, it gives the light a sense of a sinister or more secretive nature. Okay, so again, it's a very. Can you see the great complexities here? Is that light is, creeping. Okay, so light's really positive, but the creeping almost gives it like an oxymoron effect, where you're like light wouldn't creep, light would shine and be really sort of iridescent and really positive. But here it's not in that sort of way. And then you heard the sparrows in the gutters. Okay, so again, we've got this real hope of nature, okay, sort of invading us in this bed, thinking about, really sort of impure thoughts. But the sparrows, which is really hopeful, are put in a gutter, which is symbolically when we're at our lowest. Okay, so it's almost the absolute opposite. So again, this juxtaposition is really clever by Eliot because it's like hope against hopelessness in this immediate sort of reaction. Then it goes on, you had such a vision of the street as the street hardly understands. So it's like you had this clear image and you know what the world should look like. And it's like really positive, straight up. You go, wow, yeah, okay, you had such a vision of the street, all right? And it's like beautiful, like it, and this imagination is great, but the reality, the next line is, as the street hardly understands. So either the personification or the hyperlarge of the street, hardly understanding, sort of gives us again the impression that very quickly we had this positive vision of our imagination of what the world could be, but then the reality is, the street can't understand why it's dark, why it doesn't get sunlight, why the world is smoky and dirty and muddy, because there's no way to understand that, okay, from the point of view of the street or of the world. It doesn't make sense. So again, this complexity of the world, this modernist sort of approach, is revealed through this. Like, why would we do this to the world that we live in? Okay, it doesn't really make sense. And then finishing that section, we're sitting along the bed's edge. Okay, so eventually we're sort of, we're up, we're moving. Oh, sorry, we're down the wrong section here. We're up, we're moving, we're sitting along the bed's edge here, where you curled the papers from your hair. So curling papers is a cheap way of doing your hair to get curls, all right? And the fact that they're papers sort of alludes to the newspapers, which is a running motif that's going to be mentioned in the next section as well. But it's a cheap way of doing it. So again, it sort of gives us the impression that we're not, sort of holistically sort of doing things, in this really positive manner. And then we've got more of this synecdoche, the hair, the soles, the feet, the hands. And to me, the synecdoche is sort of used to represent essentially that we're only parts, we're not whole. And the synecdoche continues on into the next sort of section. It was in the earlier sections, he uses it throughout the whole poem. To me, to sort of say that we are only part of, we're not whole and not totally existent, okay, within this world, because the industrial age has made us almost, separate from, pure meaning, okay, and what is good. It's sort of, invaded us and pervaded our souls and made us quite dark, okay, just like the world that we're living in. And then when you see, so the curl papers from your hair or clasps the yellow soles of feet. Now remember, this is essentially the vision that you had is now clasped the yellow soles of your feet. Okay, so again, the same color in proofread, which is dirty, stained. That's a very, very negative sort of use of the word yellow. It's not bright and sunshine. It's on the bottom of our feet. It's at the bottom. Again, a little bit like the crab that we sort of, like the crab sort of metaphor that we saw in proofread. It's you're deep down, again like Guido in the lower circles of hell. And it's in the palm, okay? And the palm generally would be like, a positive, like open hands and, Jesus Christ, like a lot of positive images there of being open and sort of welcoming, but those hands are soiled. So again, as soon as we get like what could be a positive, it's very quickly negated by a word that has, an opposite meaning. So then we move on to the final section, and we're squarely in a fairly negative poem here about industrialization and the world that we exist in being really dirty and not, there's no real positive imagery being created here. And like I said, even when it is, it's contradicted immediately by something quite negative. So the final stanza here, or the final section, has a few stanzas, and it starts with his soul stretched tight across the skies. So now we're not you, we're his, okay, we're a little bit more specific, but the soul is us, like I said, this is who we are. And the metaphor to me is like a link to proofread at the start with, etherized across the sky. But the soul is like stretched. Now again, let's make this a positive first. So it's stretched, man. It's like our soul's everywhere. It's like we're, like I said, omnipresent. But then our soul that's stretched across the skies that fade behind a city block. So very quickly, our soul is fading and our soul is behind a city block sort of framed in this city landscape. So it's not, again, a positive. It's like we're trapped within this industrial sort of world that exists. Or even worse than faded, it could be trampled, okay, by incessant feet. So this soul now is getting sort of knocked down by people stepping on it. Again, like the crab at the bottom, of the sort of food chain in the world. And again, the synecdoche, the incessant feet now are doing this to us, okay, and sort of causing this pain. Then we've got this motif of time again at 4 and 5 and 6 o'clock. And we've got this inconsistent time frame like we had in proofread where we were at 6 o'clock, now we're at 4 and 5 and 6 o'clock. But essentially this is also the cycle of the day, okay? So now it's like a little bit more inconsistent, a little bit more time span, a little bit like that soul stretched. And at 4 and 5 and 6 o'clock, we're probably at 4 like waiting for work to finish. At 5, we're happy that work's finished. And 6 o'clock, we're sort of at home and we're hopefully getting away from that world. But we can see that what we're in that world is those impure thoughts that are flickering. Okay, so it's like we can't escape. We're either at the factory producing smoke and dirt, or we're at home and we're producing it in our minds. And then we've got short square fingers stuffing pipes, okay, which would be just an action of people sort of smoking, which again sort of a bit like the drinking, negative sort of habits. I wouldn't say as negative, like we don't like smoking now, but it probably wouldn't have been seen as negative. But again, it's a process. Stuff my evening pipe, have my pipe and my evening paper that I read, and the evening paper is from the morning essentially. That the information's obsolete already. Okay, so it's like Remember, they don't have TV at this stage, so the evening newspaper is their source of information, but that was written yesterday, okay, or the night before, so it's not like it's really even that relevant anymore. So can you see again, but this rigmarole, this mundane cycle of existence. And then we go to the eyes that are assured, okay, so again, a positive, eyes are positive, window into the soul sort of thing. And they're assured of certain certainties, okay, which I don't like. It's a paradox. It doesn't really make sense. How can you be certain of certainties? Or potentially it makes perfect sense, but it's more positive than uncertain certainties or uncertain uncertainties. All right, but the idea of the certain certainties, and this thing that we sort of doesn't quite make sense, but it does make sense, is that we know reality. We know what is there, and the reality is that our conscience is of a blackened street, okay, because that's the reality. That's not the imagination anymore of this vision. It is the blackened street, and that's the industrial world that has, like I said, it's invaded our actual psyche, so we're actually blackened as well, our souls and our thoughts, like I said before, it's been trampled by insistent feet. And we're impatient, okay, to assume the world. So we want to maybe make different assumptions, but remember what he said in Proof Rock, how should I presume? Well, I should presume things will go bad. Okay, so how should we, we're impatient to assume the world, but that assumption is probably going to be incorrect, okay? And that impatience, that personification of the blackened street and the world that we're living in, is because we don't want it to be true, but when we're assured of those certain certainties, we know it's blackened, okay? We know the world is blackened. Then we move to the next stanza and we get back to I now. So we had you, we had his, now we've got I, personal pronoun. I am moved by fancies that are curled. So he's moved by these fancies that are curled, just like the paper that you put in your hair to curl it. And the fancies again are this imagination, that are going to be like great. But remember, they're curled like those cheap way of getting curled hair. So straight away that connection to curled isn't as positive. And those fancies are curled because they're the newspapers, the ideas, the reports of what's happening, and the reports are the truth. And those truths maybe aren't like real pretty, like they're like of people dying in factories, or the effect and the impact of this sort of industrial world that this person's living in. And they're curled around these images, and these images could be going back to those flickering sort of images from section 3, and cling. All right, so they're clinging to him. All right, even though he would not like them to. Okay, because he wants to be moved by fancies, but they're curled like the paper around these images, and they cling to him. All right, like he can't let them go. And then he gets to this really interesting reference, the notion of some infinitely gentle. How beautiful is that? Infinitely gentle, and infinitely the idea of forever. But then it goes to infinitely suffering, and we've got this immediate paradox of gentle versus suffering. How can the same person? How could you be an infinitely gentle and infinitely suffering at the same time? But when we think about this reference to Jesus Christ, we get the idea that he was a very gentle man. The savior of the world, but also suffering. Well, his crucifixion was the ultimate in suffering. So it's interesting that he would make this reference here when he's saying, I'm moved by these fancies, that are curled around these images and cling, but he's trying to think of something fairly positive. But obviously, even within that positivity, he's got this great sense of suffering of this crucifixion that Jesus ultimately endured. This is going to really link very heavily into a poem at the end called Journey to the Magi. And the reason why I say that now is that I'm going to make a bit of a wild sort of analysis at the end of this poem that is going to link into Journey to the Magi. So I'll mention that now so that it'll make sense when I do that. In the last stanza, we've got wipe your hand across your mouth, okay, and we've got the synecdoche again, like the parts of it, and laugh, okay. So again, like the eternal footman in Proof Rock, the laugh. Laughter generally would be positive, but this doesn't seem so positive. So wiping your hand across your mouth and laugh sort of seems like you're covering up. And we've got the world's revolving, okay? So again, we've got this idea of revolution, the cyclical sort of idea. Essentially, it's like the world's revolving, like ancient women, right? And we'll look at this similarly in a second, but the revolution means like that the composition is indicating that the prelude will never end, okay, that we're stuck in this industrial nightmare and that we can't escape from it. And we're like these ancient women who gather fuel in vacant lots, all right? So why would you gather fuel? Well, when you think about the evening newspapers, and then you actually go back to those newspapers in this section, and the newspapers were actually in vacant lots. Okay, so if we link all of that together, the ancient women are actually burning, those newspapers and burning that news and information. Now, so let's say the news were going to reveal to us how bad everything was. Well, then we're actually burning that, okay, and we're gathering fuel, and we're going to remain in these empty, vapid lots. This wasteland that we exist in, okay? So can you see there's these multiple links to other sections of the poem to sort of confirm that there's no way of almost getting out of this. It's a little bit hopeless in that sort of sense. Now, this hopelessness is, I think, derived from the industrialized truth and reality that we exist in. But then I think it's challenged by this next poem, or the last poem, Journey to the Magi, where essentially he starts to convert to a faith-based sort of poem, where he actually looks at the influence that religion has had on him. And I'm going to argue then that the prelude is not a prelude to nothing, as many people would suggest. It is definitely a prelude to the nothingness of the industrial world and the industrial age, but I don't think it's a prelude to nothing. I think this poem actually acts as a prelude to Eliot's sort of growing passion for Christianity. And I'll make that argument because in the final poem, Journey to the Magi, you'll actually see Eliot be somewhat positive in the way that he looks at his own life and his own world. So obviously when you've read that poem, that might make more sense, or you could totally disagree with it. But I'll just leave that there for you to consider at this stage. All right, thank you so much for listening. I hope this gives you some ability to revise what we've done in class today. Thanks.